Ann Phillips, unfortunately, could not be here, so I am here in her stead as moderator. I'm Colby King from Bridgewater State University, also a couple of other folks from Bridgewater State University on the panel here. I'll say their names, but then I think maybe we could start by just going through brief introductions. We have, and then I'll ask some questions and we can talk more. We have a couple of faculty folks and a couple of student folks. We have Sean McPherson from Bridgewater State, Debbie Warnock from Bennington College, Lindsay, I'm sorry, how am I blanking right now? Lindsay Boyle from Bridgewater State University, and Jocelyn Salcedo from Bennington College. Why don't we do brief introductions and ask some questions.
What would you like us to say?
All right, then, let's start with this. Maybe tell us where you're at now in sort of your academic career as a student or faculty member. And the first question I was going to have is, tell us a little bit about your expectations for college in your household growing up. So maybe as you tell us a little bit about where you're at now, how that squares with what your expectations were growing up. All right. Why don't we start here and go down this way? So Jocelyn, if you could go ahead.
My name is Jocelyn Salcedo, and I just graduated from Bennington College.
And she got married.
With no debt?
With a lot of debt. And I studied social psychology there and anthropology. And growing up, I never really thought about college until like my junior year when my counselor was like, "You're going to college." And I knew that wasn't really an option for me financially. And my mom was like, "Well, if you want to go, then I support you, but we don't have the money, so you're basically on your own." So I think my counselor was my biggest support, and she explained like the basics of applying to college, and I never knew that going into a private university would be actually cheaper. I thought my best option would be community college or a UC because I'm from San Diego. And then I applied to Bennington, and they gave me a lot of money, but it still wasn't enough. And then my counselor told me that you could actually appeal and ask for more money, and I was blown away. I was like, they're basically paying me to go there, and then I can ask for more? Like, I was shocked. So then I asked for more, and they gave it to me, and it was almost a free ride, so I just went to Vermont. But I never had that college conversation with my mom. It was pretty much, well, if you're interested, then you can go, but I have no knowledge to give you.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing. Congratulations again. All right.
Okay. I'm Debbie Warnock. I'm sociology faculty at Bennington College. Let's see. So when I was growing up, I don't remember ever talking about college in my household. It wasn't something that really ever came up. I sort of had to, I knew that I wanted to go because I had a sense that that's how I could make more money and not be so financially insecure. Plus, I really liked school. But in terms of figuring out how that worked, it was a very rocky process for me. Also, like Jocelyn, I think that, I didn't have a lot of, I wouldn't even say that it was like support or no support. It's just kind of neutral and just slowly people pay for it, the same sort of thing. And I sort of had to figure it out all on my own. I worked at a bookstore when I was 16, and I would like on breaks take college guides in the back with me and like read them and try and figure out how this works. And again, I never, really knew if I could pay for it. I thought that the only college counselor that came to my high school, which was a low-income inner-city high school, was from a community college, and he told me this is the only place you could ever go. It's the only place you'll be able to afford. And I didn't really know anything until a girl the year ahead of me was being recruited by Wellesley College, and they flew her up and everything. And then she came back and told me, "Debbie, they give you money." And I was still a junior, so I still had some time. And I thought, oh, okay, cool. Well, then I guess all those like fancy colleges I read about in guidebooks that I thought I could never go to, maybe I actually could. And so I applied to Vassar and also got financial aid, and it wasn't enough. And my English teacher told me that I could ask for more, and I was flummoxed by that too. It was like, but they're being so generous as it is. And she even told me, ask them to fly you up too, once I got in, because I'd never actually visited that campus or anywhere else I had applied. I'd never been to. So they actually did. They flew me up. They gave me more money. And I remember getting to the campus and thinking, this is the most beautiful place I've ever seen in my life. This was like what I pictured college to be. And so that's how I ended up at Vassar. And I'll stop there.
Yeah. All right, so my name is Lindsay Boyle. I'm an undergrad at Bridgewater State University. I am part of a student group that's up and running on campus for first gen and working class students. I come from a working class background, so I'm very similar to these ladies. My parents were just kind of like, do whatever you want after high school. You know what I mean? I didn't really have the pressure to go to college or to even get a good job for the future. My parents were just like, just do whatever you want, which is awesome, but at the same time it left me with like really no direction of what I wanted to do or what I even should do. So yeah, I'm still figuring it out, it's still going along the way, but it ended up benefiting me because I didn't really have the pressure to be a doctor or make a significant income. So that's like my house.
I'm Sean McPherson. I teach in the Art and History Department at Bridgewater State University. And when I was growing up, I think the most important thing was, for me, was that I came from a very unusual family. My father was a spiritual seeker. And so when my family was intact, up until around age 9, we were very genteelly poor. You know, we didn't have television, we didn't have radio, we didn't have electricity and things like that. You know, we lived in tents and stuff like that. But we had a lot of books, right? From the age of 10, we became traditionally poor. My father departed the scene, and you know, we're living in inner city Boston, and my mom is, you know, from a sugarcane plantation immigrant family in Big Island, Hawaii. She had a high school education, and so then we were traditionally poor. You know, 4 students, a single mother, brown mother, in a black neighborhood, and so for me, when I was coming up, it was higher education was something that was kind of abstract. But when I was in the 7th grade, I went to Boston Latin School. It's a public exam school, and so as my family fell apart around me and I became independent at the age of 16, so for my last 2 years of high school, I was thousands of miles away from anyone in my family. I wasn't receiving any support. High school was a source of stability, and as my family fell apart and all sorts of catastrophic things happened, you know, that was the one thing that I had. And so, kind of ironically, you know, I ended up at a place very similar to Vassar, Williams College. And the reason I made the decision to go there was because my headmaster told me, you know, you got into all these schools, whatever you do, McPherson, don't go to fucking Williams. The blue bloods will eat you alive. And so I made the decision to go there.
Ow!
You know, I showed up there, and no sheets, no blankets. You know, I forgot about those sort of details. Like, you know, you need sheets and blankets and stuff like that. I wasn't as resourceful. I'm always amazed at people that, you know, do the appeals and everything. So all I remember was that there were 3 lines. One was for my legal father, one was for my legal mother, and one was for me, and I paid all of those. And so I did have a pretty decent amount of debt by the time I graduated, but I did finish in 3 years. So, you know, that I managed to sort of, you know, cut. It would have been a lot more than I think if I had taken longer. But it's kind of strange because on the one hand, higher education was taken for granted because I went to a school where you were expected to go to college. But on the other hand, you know, my mother, who was, you know, completely outer space concept for her, you know, she did get a degree herself when she was in her 40s. You know, after I had, she went back to school. But my dad was extremely opposed to higher education in principle. You know, he was a spiritual seeker. Like, that's all selling out and being part of the system and everything. So he, you know, he basically, my 2 children are in college, and
thank you all for sharing. Briefly, I might say too. I had a mixed set of messages in my family. I was the smart kid, and the idea was that like I heard messages like, well, you're smart, so you got to go to college, or like they'll figure you out when you go to college, right? Which was a fun message, but very supportive and encouraging. And my parents were very supportive and encouraging. And I had gotten good enough grades that there was the idea that I should apply to the small liberal arts colleges in the area that were like nicer, if not the prestigious, Grinnells or Williamses and Vassars, right? So we toured a bunch of campuses because my family liked road trips and that was a free activity to do, right? Once you got there. But I ended up going to a small liberal arts college that was pretty close to where my parents lived, and I thought I had gotten enough scholarship money to have a free ride. I didn't realize that the tuition costs would go up every year. And even after being an RA for 2 years, I ended up graduating with a little over $20,000 in debt from undergrad. And I mean, I had a great education, some really awesome professors, but I spent most of the time on campus feeling like an outsider. Most of the students on campus were from upper middle class families, very predominantly white campus. Like a high percentage of the campus belonged to Greek organizations, and I didn't understand why you want to spend money on something like that. So I didn't do that, and I spent a lot of weekends going home visiting my friends from high school. So that gave me a particular like angle on the whole thing. My parents said, well, you're smart, you should be a doctor or a lawyer. I didn't know any doctors or lawyers. And the ones on TV seemed like they were stressed out. So, yeah. But I knew professors. There was a state university in my school district growing up, and I knew some sons and daughters of professors. And I was like, oh, that's something you can do if you're good at school. And professors are endlessly fascinating, so you get to work around them for a career. So I went into academia. I went into grad school not having a sense of how much it might all cost, how much risk was involved with taking on all that student loan debt, and like how treacherous the economic job market could be. But I was fortunate to land a job my first year on the market, Bridgewater State University, an institution I'm really happy to be working at. So I think that's a rough summary of my story too. And I think I see from these stories, we see lots of things where like the identity and the resources on campus and what we know about campuses and how we kind of all stumbled into the various institutions that we were in different ways is interesting. So I wonder if we might reflect on the pros and cons of the various institutions you've moved through in higher ed, whether as a student or as a professor who's maybe taught at a few institutions. I think Sean and Debbie have some experience at a variety of places. So maybe if anyone would care to share some stories about that. I like that we have students from Bennington and from Bridgewater, right? Different sorts of institutions. And maybe we could talk about pros and cons of those a little bit. Yeah. Who wants to go first?
Well, when I first heard about Bennington, it was presented as this really small school where everybody's friends and there's a lot of racial and ethnic diversity. Um, and when I got there, I really fell in love with the place. I felt like this is where I needed to be at that time. And then I met other people and I kept looking for somebody else during orientation that looked like me. And there was only like 3 other Latino students in that class. Um, so it was very isolating, and it felt really unnatural for me, even though I knew that's what I was meant to be doing, and it felt like it was gonna be a really tough, lonely journey since the beginning. Um, and I knew that the education was great and the school was great in itself. Just I felt like I didn't have anybody else who looked like me. Um, so I think that was the hardest part. Just feeling like there's somebody that you can relate to, and you're the only one going through this one thing.
Did that impact your sense of whether how you felt if you belonged there or not? in the writing on first gen working class students, there's a consideration of this idea of the sense of belonging,
Yeah.
right? So did that cause you to feel like you didn't belong there, even with all the promises and the recruitment materials and stuff?
Yeah, it did.
But you graduated, so how did you overcome that and make yourself part of the institution, right? Now they have to claim you, right? Because you're in the room.
Yeah, they have to. Yeah, I think just finding those little pockets of people that even though they're not also Mexican, they're low income or they're working class, and then you have experiences that you can relate to. So I think that's just how I got through college, and not having a really big social circle. Like I see other people like having that sort of social engagement in the greater college community. I think just finding those people that you can relate to. But it took me like 2 years to do that.
I just have a brief question. So you did find other first gens.
Yeah.
Of white first gens, black first gens.
Yeah, of all backgrounds,
all colors.
and
Yeah.
Yes.
So was that kind of eye-opening for you?
It was. Because I didn't really have the knowledge or the language to discuss my experiences, or like money is not something that you talk to your friends about. Like, oh, how much do your parents make? Like, did they go to college? Like, what is their...
Yeah.
You don't really get to those things, and even with my best friend, it took me 2 years to find out that she was also first gen. Because we didn't really get into those kind of details.
Yeah.
And actually, Debbie and I formed FLOW, which stands for First Gen Low Income and Working Class, and it's a student group on campus.
The best acronym.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We're going to steal that.
Yeah. And it's just nice when you walk into like a social gathering for FLOW. It's white people, Mexicans, international students from all grades and social backgrounds.
I think this is maybe a surprisingly common experience for first gen working class students, where they make friends on campus, not really having a specified sense of what they have in common with these folks, and then a couple years later they reflect and they're like, oh, it was the financial insecurity of our individual families that we had in common, right?
Yeah.
Hence the few friends I made were very skeptical of the idea of spending money on joining a fraternity, so they didn't either. And it was because they had also come from less well-to-do backgrounds. So that's, I think, an interesting aspect where sometimes the identity is not made explicit, but somehow there's like a subconscious radar or something.
Yeah.
Right?
And sometimes it's not made explicit until years and years later.
Yeah.
So in my experience at Vassar, I went through all 4 years never knowing anybody else who was on heavy financial aid like me. It just wasn't talked about. I was white, so I think there was the assumption that I was middle or upper middle class. And I, to be honest, was interested in preserving that assumption because I had such imposter syndrome. I didn't want people to figure out that I was like, from a trailer park and didn't belong. And so I went through all 4 years of college never thinking that I had that I knew anybody else who came from a similar background. And 3 years ago, I met up with some of my friends at Vassar. We did like a reunion weekend, our own reunion weekend, because interestingly, none of us feel comfortable going to the reunions, the formal reunions. And it was at this reunion weekend 3 years ago, 13 years after we originally graduated, that I was talking about some of the work that I do, and they were all like, oh wait, I was on financial aid too. You were? Oh yeah, I'm the first in my family to go to college. I was like, you were? And I think there was just so much stigma, and everybody in this group was white too, I should say. There was so much stigma around it that we never even talked about it. All 4 years and 13 years after that we'd remained friends, it had never come up, never talked about it, and we realized like over breakfast the last day of our little reunion, and just it was shocking to all of us, and to me that really kind of shows the extent to which, and I don't think it would have come up if I hadn't sort of.
Oh, Debbie, you've got to write that story.
Yeah.
You have to write that story.
Isn't that amazing?
It's totally amazing. You've got to write write it, maybe even publish it in our journal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Barb.
Oh, that's really good. Yeah. I'm curious to hear from Sean and Lindsay too.
Yeah, definitely. So I definitely agree with Jocelyn about how there was like all this diversity on college campus, but even myself, like I couldn't really find a group that I fit in with or certain people. Like even if we shared similar interests, I still wasn't really finding someone that I connected with until I met some other first gen and working class students on campus, and that's when I was kind of really like, wow, these are the people that kind of get me and that can help me through college and help me through this process. Something that I definitely struggled with was that, and Debbie, kind of touched about it a little bit, was the imposter syndrome, and it's wondering like, is this even worth it? Is my time and my money and everything that I'm sort of putting to this sociology degree, is it going to be worth it in the end? Because your parents kind of expect you to make a certain amount of money, or even you have self expectations of how lifestyle you want to live, and that's something that I'm still working through and still kind of figuring out, but it's you just got to keep pushing, and it's like meeting people that are first gen and working class that you can help out or you can share your experiences with. I feel like that at the end of the day keeps me going, yeah, I always ask the question of like, is this really worth it? Is it going to be worth it in the end? But you just find people that have the same mindset as you, that share similar, feelings and everything like that. So.
Did you ever consider leaving college because you couldn't find someone to connect with?
Oh, every
semester.
Oh, even still, yeah, definitely. But part of it was because I couldn't find anyone at first when I was a freshman and sophomore. It was definitely because I struggled to find people that like could help me and could share these similar experiences with. You kind of feel alone. Like, am I the only person that's dealing with like financial aid or struggling with financial aid, or how you're going to pay for the first semester and second semester of college, and should I even take summer courses, but I have to work? It's like it was very much an internal debate that I was having my freshman and sophomore year, and I definitely kind of second guessed college in general. But then, like I said, you meet certain people who realize like, you're all kind of struggling with saving money, figuring out FAFSA, dealing with your family back home. You kind of like, you meet those people and you're like, okay, we can all kind of do this together. There's a light at the end of the tunnel for it, kind of. So.
In a session earlier today, Rennie Christopher was talking about how some of the elite institutions are so well resourced that they can provide like supportive protection for every student, right? Students in financial need, other sorts of need, but also students without financial need, and there's all these supports to help. And I think we've got some experience in the diversity of institutions here that each have pros and cons, right? So Vassar or Williams or whatever, right, might have lots of resources, but might also have such a minority of first gen and working class students that it's something that's stigmatized even more. Whereas Bridgewater and other public institutions, maybe more than half of the student body is working class, but does anyone on campus, whether professors teaching a 4-4 or the students who are working 40 hours a week off campus, does anyone have time to even talk about it, right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's taken for granted. So I'm interested in exploring those pros and cons a little bit too. What do you all think? I don't know.
I can talk about, so I've helped organize groups for first gen low-income working class students on 3 different campuses now. And the first time, well, I guess I could say tried, because the first time and was actually when I was a graduate student at University of Washington, and I was working with tutoring basically first gen undergrad students, and I was trying to put a group together, but it was basically next to impossible because all of them worked 40 hours a week, and I don't think any of them lived on campus. So it was one of those things that they went there to take their classes, and then they bused to their jobs, and then they, so there wasn't any time for extracurriculars or anything like that. And so then when I was a professor at University of Louisville, I honestly didn't even try, because I thought, well, that's the problem, right? Students don't have time even for this sort of thing. And then there's also so many other first gen working class students that when I taught at Cortland, and and ask them at that institution, kind of like, what's your comfort level here as first gen or whatever. They thought it was an odd question. They're like, we're all working and we're all like trying to be mobile, upwardly mobile. Like, what are you asking about?
Yeah.
So I think that it is a big difference, but I think your point about like the support systems in place at larger institutions, there's not the scaffolding there for every student the way there is at liberal arts colleges, but then there's not also the class salience that there is at liberal arts colleges.
And I think there's also, not to pull age rank here, right, but there's also a generational thing, right, that those liberal arts colleges 25 or 30 years ago, as opposed to 15 years ago, right? They didn't have that sort of attention to first-gen people. So when I was in school,
They didn't when I was there.
well, what I mean is, it was really something that was just completely off the radar, and to the point that one of the experiences that I remember when I was in school, because I was a student radical, there's a multicultural center at school there. That's something that was demanded back in the late 80s by our student group, which is the only significant sort of radical group since like the 60s. And I was very conscious of the fact that as someone who is a minority, and I'm from Hawaii, my mother was a leader of the Hawaiian autonomy movement, and I came of age in a 100% African-American neighborhood, right? And so I had a sort of orientation of thinking of myself as a minority in many ways. And I was very aware that that was a privileged position because I had an automatic group of international students and so forth. And most of those people were quite wealthy. And I was conscious in the time that I was there that the people who had the most difficult time were white working class people, because they had no fucking home. They had no place to go. They had major psychological issues, many of them dropped out. And the fundamental thing was that sense of alienation. I had, a sense of purpose, because I guess race was something around which you could organize. That was when the South African investment movement was going on. Yeah. And because of where I came from coming in, I had this sense of being at home, even though, I was working 7 jobs, even though I was sending money to my younger brother, my younger sister, even though I was sending money to my mother, to my, to sort of keep things afloat, right? I didn't have to keep up appearances, because if you're such a freak, if you have like 2 pairs of sweatpants to your name, then you don't have to worry about that. There's no way that anybody would ever mistake you for being, almost to the point that you can perform the other to an extreme degree, and people, might actually think maybe this guy's like a fucking millionaire, and he just wears the same pair of sweatpants as a fashion statement. So I think this idea of class, that I was very conscious that was the taboo subject. Yeah. And you couldn't talk about it. And I would never talk about that with my friends. They would be paying for things with money from their parents, and I would be paying with it because I hadn't slept in 72 hours. Because I've been working at a pizza joint, then I've been doing yard work, and then I've been a research assistant, I've been a translator, and then I've been driving people down somewhere else, and here it is, and we're doing the same thing. But I wouldn't talk about the fact like, dudes, we have the same papers, haven't slept in 72 hours, and it's just really amazing coming back. I went back to the campus a quarter century later, and I remember walking on that campus, and I had this overwhelming feeling. My daughter goes there now. Walking around that campus, I just had a picture of myself, and I said, what a fucking freak. If I saw myself on this campus today, I would think, what the fuck is this person? What planet did they come from? How could they possibly be walking around here?
Does that get at, I think Sarah Adfield's written a little bit about respectability, the idea that that we learn to behave certain ways, right? Maybe socialize to become middle class, really. And Debbie has written about this in some of her writing about how lots of higher ed institutions embrace the idea of diversity and inclusion, but every kind of diversity except class, in part because many folks see the mission of academia as creating the middle class, right? And not just like for the joy of creating more middle class people, but for making everyone behave, right? To behave as if they're middle class. Which leads me to my next question. Maybe we can reflect on that as we think about this question, but just to what extent does your working class background or working class identity matter to you, or how does it matter to you and what you do, and how you interact with your institution, what your plans are, going forward after graduation or whatever too. How is that identity activated? To what extent do you care to sort of proclaim it? How do you tangle with middle class pressures, all of that? Maybe Sean, you've talked about that a little bit right there. If you want to say any more, you're welcome to do.
Well, I have to give props to Dr. King here because my first teaching job was at a high second tier liberal arts college, Wheaton College in Massachusetts. And during the time that I taught there, I had this constant sense of cognitive dissonance, that I was very close to my students, but I felt, is this my life? Helping people who started on third base, get home. And I considered leaving academia. I actually did leave academia briefly, and this very fortuitous thing that came up with the position at Bridgewater State University. This is really the first time, thanks in large part to this guy here and the stuff that he's done, that I sort of came out of the closet. Now it is 100% something that is front and center. And when I was at a private liberal arts college, there were so few students who were really from that background.
Yeah.
That opportunity to mentor people. All of them, the 4 students that I had at the time I taught, they all have PhDs now. So they tend to be, they're people sort of like me. They were very good academically from super poor backgrounds.
Yeah.
But at Bridgewater, I feel like my job and my identity finally have kind of come together. And this working class studies and all these other things. In art history, it's a very sort of class biased area, right? To put it mildly. Right? So I sort of feel like here and in the activities with my students and with my institution, I finally have found a space where my experience matters. And when I talk to students and I get them in my office and I say, could it be this? I know what's going on in their lives, in a way that I didn't, with students who have equally important problems as individuals, but they're just ones that are so different. Your sort of psychological issues with the pressure you're getting about, your 7th trust fund or whatever. They may be serious to you individually, but they're not things that I can relate to as well. And the issues that my students have now, I feel that my experiences, mesh very, very well with what my students need. And so now I would say in middle age, it's absolutely, central. The identity is very central, and it empowers me and helps me to do my work as an educator.
Yeah, just kind of piggybacking off of that, I think I don't really know where my working class background is going to lead me in the future or where it's going to help me. But I think it definitely helps. It makes my passion and my drive to help other students on campus. Kind of like Sean was saying, that's how I can connect with other people. So I think that alone, and the fact that I'm trying to provide some other resources and just let students know that they're not alone. I feel like that, for where I'm at right now, is definitely benefiting me. So.
Yeah, I think it was actually the 2016 First Gen Summit that I attended, and it was life-changing because I stopped feeling ashamed because I was first gen and low income and working class. So I think ever since that, I embraced it fully, and I like to explore that identity from a place of independence and empowerment and self-awareness, and that's what we try to spread with Flow. But as with everything, there's pros and cons, right? Especially now that I graduated, trying to sell myself is really, really hard for me. Because I feel like, even though in paper it seems great, it's really hard for me to be like, I did this and on my own and with fewer resources. And I think that is hard
even when Debbie asked me to be her research assistant, I was in shock, but I hesitated because I was like, well, maybe I won't be able to deliver what she expects of me. And then at every meeting that we had, when she said that my work was great, it was like shocking, and it was really an emotional moment because I couldn't believe that I was doing that work and I had come so far. So I think just being proud is like, it's hard sometimes.
Yeah, I would say echo that. I still struggle with that too.
Yep.
With the self-promotion. Um, it's much easier for me to build other people up. But I would say my working class identity is I like live and breathe it every single day. This is what I do. And it's because, this is what I teach on. My courses are about access to education and higher education. And I'm teaching a class on the working class next year and all about inequality. So that's what I teach. It's my research. And then it's also, the work that I do on and off campus, just nonstop. So it's just what I'm thinking about and what I'm doing all day, all the time, every day. But it's definitely been a journey to get there because I think, like Jocelyn was saying, it took me much longer. I'm like so amazingly proud of you. Like you're my hero because like the way that she put herself out on campus and I think was so brave in starting this organization and everything. And I, when I was in your position, I still wasn't even talking about it. I still wasn't even owning this. It took me until like midway through graduate school. And then it took me until my first job to even say it publicly. The first time I ever publicly talked about my background was my first year being a visiting assistant professor at Skinner College. I was on a panel. And that was the first time I ever did it. And I was like shaking. and I think it was, because I talked about before the imposter syndrome and being scared of being found out. And so it's been a really long journey for me to get here. I feel like where I am is where I'm supposed to be. And that I feel so fulfilled in the work that I do and the people that I work with. But it has definitely been a journey.
Yeah, just on that issue of self-promotion, with which I agree, I relate completely. I think maybe, different kinds of intersections here. I mean, part of it is also being a woman. Because, we're always, told not to promote yourself. And if you do want to promote yourself, well, how do you promote yourself? What would be seen as assertive and a man is seen as aggressive or pushy in a woman. And I was also raised in a Catholic family, and I remember this: blessed are the meek, for they shall possess the earth. And that these kinds of the other messages that I got about not promoting yourself.
And there's a cultural thing there too, I think, as well. I mean, from a my family's a plantation family from Hawaii, and the worst thing you can be is self-promoting or egotistical or selfish, right? And so kind of saying like I did this, it's definitely not the way that it just doesn't come natural at all. Which in academia hurts you. You're constantly told, you have to toot your own horn.
Yes.
Right?
So I think on the issue of the intersectionality, self-promotion, let me grab. I feel like I should disclose that I
still am.
Yeah. I think the word I would use to describe it, I think, must be overcompensated. When I was in college, I was like this hyper activist. I was like secretary of the Campus Green Party. I helped found the Sierra Club. I was part of Amnesty International. I was always like protesting something, right? I'm really obnoxious, and I think. I don't know, but I think I was maybe doing that as a proxy for I was trying to like disrupt the comfort of all the peers around me, I think. And I was also, I could pass, right, I could pass as middle class, I was a straight white male, so I kind of just took it on myself to demand the attention and the special favors and stuff, right? I was trying to, for the first 3 years of college, I was trying to like finagle my own like unique major by like combining classes from different disciplines and stuff. So I like met with the dean several times to work on that, and just assumed that he'd be happy to give me his time, and like that kind of stuff. So I think there's this weird mismatch where I came from this working class background, didn't really feel like I fit in on campus with my peers, but I was very obnoxious and demanding. Some of that I think on the back of other privileges that I had in juxtaposition to the working class background, and maybe as a form of like overcompensating or a proxy for advocating around class issues. I was like trying to tell everyone about like how, I don't know, voting for Dennis Kucinich in the primary would be awesome or something. Yeah. So I think that a little bit of the different responses to that. So I kind of identify with yourself as being a freak in a way, because I remember we on Columbus Day had a big protest where a group of us, Jeremy Baker's here, he and I and a group of other people in the Green Party took a big cardboard box and cut it into the shape of a ship, and then we're on campus in the quad passing out flyers calling Columbus saying that he's responsible for genocide, right? And passing out these flyers, like this crazy activist stuff. I think a lot of folks were looking at it, like, what are these kids doing? So I can kind of identify with that. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I don't know. You had Barbara.
I know, but not the mouth of the
Well, one thing I've been thinking about, maybe this is something for us all to reflect on because we've passed through different institutions, graduating, we're going to graduate soon. After the class action summit, a group of us were eating, and a theory was proposed that the quality of in the classroom education between an elite school and Bridgewater State or some other state university is not all that much different. And what you're really getting with prestige and status of the various institutions might be the support systems, the extra funding or whatever for the support systems. It might also be the class barriers, right? The sort of like stigmatization of working class backgrounds with institutions where it's a real minority. But also a real difference in those institutions is the social networks you derive from having a degree from that institution, right? Because we know college isn't just a degree, but it's the alumni network you can tap into and the particular people you can ask for a letter of recommendation. And so I wonder if we want to reflect on what that means for higher ed, what it means for our circumstances passing through these institutions. I don't know if you care to reflect on that at all or not. Yeah, like I kind of wish, when I was applying, for example, when I was applying to graduate school, I kind of regretted telling some of my professors that I was learning more from my activism than I was in class.
Oh, that's a red flag.
So, yeah. Yeah.
I was going to say something about the self-promotion ethic and how weary I am of the constant self-promotion of my professional class, and without even knowing they're doing it. I mean, they're good people. They can be just lovely people, and still everything has that, or not everything, but I mean, so many things have that self-promotion. I was in a really weird place that when I got my book, because I'm a natural extrovert, and I've done training, and I helped launch class action, and with police, and but after years of writing, and not, also the complete, well, other things were going on in my life, people were dying, everybody close to me died or left, so that I won't say that it didn't have to do with my personal life too, but it really was like after years of writing alone, in this very introverted activity, my marriage fell apart, partly because I wasn't available to do all the things that I did for us, and we were musicians, and by the time it was time to promote myself, it was really hard. I lost that grace. I used to get up and then just open my mouth and I'll talk all kinds of bullshit. Whatever, it's like the essay questions, Yeah, give me an essay question. Don't ask me multiple choice because I can talk. But it was different. I mean, not to say that they all went badly. Some went terribly and some went well. But I just didn't have, and it felt wrong I didn't realize how deep that was in me. or how much it annoys me in other people until I was supposed to be doing it, and it felt really awful. You know, I remember watching years and years ago, watching somebody with a doctorate. What was her name? She did lesbian ethics, the book Lesbian Ethics, and then she toured around the country. I can't remember her name, but anyways, and she did this thing that, and she was, you know, it was a huge group discussion at this women's space, and everything, when people said things, she'd say, yeah, I covered that in my book. And I remember thinking, you know, get in life, you know. It was like, let the people talk, you know. Don't say I covered that in my book. You know, say something, you know. And then I was somebody who had a book, and I was just I didn't want to be one of those people. And part of it was that I didn't have any money because I had to, you know, I mean, class doesn't go away. Maybe if you get a job at an elite institution, but class stays your whole life. And you know, now I'm almost 65, and I've seen so many of my friends get inheritances. You know, I used to be jealous of them because they got their college educations paid for, and I paid mine off at 45. But but now you know, it's like now I'm facing old age. And the time I took to write that book brought my income way down because I had to work as little as I could, even though I'm a professional psychologist, so I have a good job. And I see a lot of working class people. So it kind of doesn't, I've gotten to where, you know, I used to think, okay, and when I first showed up in working class studies, I'm like, I'm a professional, you know, I'm going to help the people who are like I was once because I didn't have anybody like that. And now I'm like, oh, I'm aging and I don't, it's still really different. Aging is really different. So, anyway, that my bit on self-promotion.
Dwight has a
Oh,
comment.
just as I hear people talking about when did you come to that realization, I haven't heard anyone talk about this, and I was at this conference a few years ago, and I talked to a woman who taught in the Bay Area at a community college. But you know, many of us who have working class backgrounds are married and we have kids. So for me, the realization that class really stands out occurred when my wife and I were raising two middle-class kids in a middle-class town called Ann Arbor, and at some point it hits you like a brick, like these kids are being raised. My wife's also first gen. These kids are being raised fundamentally different than how I was raised, and so it was actually a motivation for me to write that essay in this fine place,
Which
so
is
far from
incredible.
home. Not to mention that.
No, to plug it.
Right.
To plug it.
So,
This fine place so far from home.
But it was a motivation.
Changed my life to read an
I
article.
needed to sit down and write about.
Wait, what's the name of the article? What article?
It's called.
Go ahead and self-promote.
The social construction of a working class academic. So now you should understand this, being a psychologist. I was beginning to resent my kids. Tell me about it. And I said, well, this is going to work out. We're going to have great relations if this continues. If you resent your children, because they're growing up in privilege and you didn't. So I just had to step back and think about my background. My wife did the same thing, and I started to become more aware of being a first-gen student and what it was probably like for other first-gen students, also what they were going through. So that was in the early 90s or so.
Yeah, I think I have a comment, personal anecdote that aligns with that, and connects back to the idea of the social networks I was thinking about. When I was in graduate school, I got invited to a graduation party for a student in a languages program who had just gotten her master's degree. She was like a friend of a friend on campus, and then we went. and they had a huge house on a lake, and I was like, what is going on? Why? Why am I at this house? And turns out her dad was a federal judge, and I was like, oh, I get to hang out with federal judge people now because I'm in grad school, and like I didn't realize that like, and then but then I did, right? And now to talk about like you know, marriage and kids and stuff. My wife is from a pretty middle class background. Both of her parents had a college degree. I'd say I'm married up, and she's still the breadwinner, which is fun. No, it's good because I mean, yeah, we need the money because we have student loan debt. But we have, I don't know that it's instincts, but the way we're predisposed to raise the kid that we just had is a little bit different. And the best example of this is like a minor thing, kind of cute, I think, is that I grew up in a working class household with multiple floors. And my dad and my mom would kind of shout at us or at each other from separate floors. Like if they're working on something like, hey, come down here and see this or whatever, right? That like hollering up and down the stairs is like a common thing. I do this at least once a week, and Carrie just won't respond.
Once a day.
You're probably once a day, yeah. And Carrie just doesn't respond. And then when I finally come downstairs, I'm like, did you not hear me? And she's like, oh, I heard you. Yeah. but we don't need to shout like that.
You better budget some money for her dental bills.
Yeah.
That's a class marker.
Oh yeah,
There was one.
Yeah. So I think the way, like the different networks we get access to through academia, right, as folks from working class backgrounds, but then the impact of navigating those networks is an interesting thing to explore for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I just have kind of sort of a network comment. What you were saying about regretting it, telling some of your professors that you were an activist. I mean, I teach in a liberal arts college at Goucher, and one of the things that we, they promote student and faculty, relationships, and we do have a lot of students who are struggling with mental illness, and they are not, most of them are not at all ashamed of it. They will come right out and tell you what they're dealing with, and it's fine. But I feel sometimes like then you get to the point where you're writing recommendations for them, and it's like usually I just give. I mean, if a student has been a good student, I give them a good recommendation because that's what I know. But I feel like you sort of put them in a tricky spot. They're like, okay, you can be honest with us, you can tell us things, and yet
we're going to evaluate.
We're going to evaluate you.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those odd things. It's not just a class issue. It's this kind of embrace that that doesn't carry any caveats with it.
Because there's a hierarchy.
There's a power differential.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
It's interesting when you talked about networks. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask. I'm particularly concerned. I'm sorry. I don't see any. I don't. We used to have name tags. I mean, name things.
Yeah. We do.
No, but I mean, we had them in front
Oh,
of us.
plates?
Yeah.
No,
So I don't know your name.
Jocelyn.
Jocelyn. But the question I have for you is related to Mexican children that are in my life that have lived across the street from me at one time, and we've become very close. I've become very close with the whole family, and they want to go to college, but the family expects them to be working, needs their full-time wages. So Carla, who was really gifted in all these ways, now she's, oh God, I hate that everything's being recorded. Let me. Well, no, I already said her name. Yeah, right. Okay, so Carla, yeah, because she's a DECA kid, Yeah. So Carla, she's gifted academically and all that stuff, but she's working full time as a receptionist, and she's bored to death. She's very artistic and creative because the family needs her money. And for everybody, it isn't only Latino families that end up with that situation, but it seems especially strong for her. And she's Mexican American. She's Mexican, and just wondered if you had anything to say to that.
Yeah, it's tricky how my mom, because I grew up with a single mom, that she thinks that you have this degree, now I expect you to support me.
Yeah.
And I'm not even employed at the moment.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of tension in that. And just, she wouldn't explicitly ask for money, but I sent some checks back home or money transfers online. Or she wouldn't say, send me money, but she would call me and be like, we don't have light in the house, we don't have electricity, or we don't know what we're gonna eat, like it's really rough. And I have younger brothers, and if I felt guilty having this money to go out for sushi once in a while, or I'm gonna buy myself something nice because I've worked so hard when my family's not stable financially.
Or even just having dining hall food.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
You can eat
And
as much as you
yeah,
want, right?
and
Yeah.
complaining about dining hall food, it's a huge
Yeah.
thing at Bennington. And for me, it's like, well, it's food. Just add some salt and pepper. I don't know. It'll be fine. But yeah, she's expecting me to contribute immediately.
Well,
And she
because
expects
family
the
is
same
such
thing
an
for
important
years.
value.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't even it come into her mind that she might, and I keep saying, well, how are we going to get you to college? She's like, I don't know. Now they just got a house in her name.
Yeah, that's the
And I
common
think
thing.
part of that conversation is about the tuition costs and resources. And Sarah Goldberg-Robb has done a lot of work, we know, on helping institutions to understand that financial aid needs to be about more than just the tuition, but it needs to be about other needs too. Like what are you going to eat over breaks, and can you get clothes, and so that you don't just have 2 pairs of jogging pants and those sorts of things, right?
Yeah, an expected family contribution of 0 is often negative, actually.
Right, actually negative.
Negative.
It's negative, but losing money.
Thank you.
Dwight?
Just to follow up on that, I was talking with Michelle on the way over, but I know many students at Michigan who they're beginning their freshman year will send money home from their work-study jobs, or many first gens, and they continue to do it all 4 years. And the university explicitly tells students at the beginning, do not send money home to your parents. And these students just go, give me a break. I'm sending money home for my parents and my siblings. And so that's that.
And from loans too.
Yep.
Like, that's 1% of family.
I remember my first year at Vassar and seeing the dining hall and feeling so guilty that I could eat as much as I wanted whenever. And I literally was trying to figure out a way that I could ship food home to my family from the dining hall. Like I was talking about it, I was like, okay, like I could maybe send bagels, but then they'd probably go bad, or like what could I send? Like really logistically trying to think about it because I felt so bad that they were, suffered from food insecurity still, and I didn't anymore.
Yeah, and I think it goes beyond material or financial need. Just having to be available all the time, no matter what you're doing.
Yeah.
To take that call
Yes.
because maybe they need
Yes.
translating. Because my mom doesn't know English, but she has also, my siblings are in high school, so she gets the calls, and then I have to go on the computer and do things for her. And just being that's emotional support always. And like, what are you doing? You're not answering. Or still like, yes, I'm working or I'm doing homework. Well, you work a lot. Well, you don't give me any money. And it's just, I think in her ideal world, my mom would prefer me to not take so much time.
Does she miss you?
Education. I mean, she has to, right? I bet she does.
She must
Yeah,
miss you.
of course she does.
You're leaving to go to another world.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Jocelyn, your comments make me think about how, when we think about working with first gen and working class students in a higher ed context, it's also about sort of both inducing on them an alienation from their families, but then that raises this question of like part of how we need to serve first gen. I teach at a small liberal arts college in rural Texas, and part of part of what I struggle with is is that at the one hand, I want my students to enter this entirely other, I want them, we call it critical thinking, and we can sleep at night, right? I want them to approach the entire world in a different way, but then they have to continue to relate to families who don't understand it, you know. And I guess it's, I'm sorry, what you're really making me think about is two things. One is, what we're asking our students to do is take a leap into a life path that their parents may not have any way to relate to at all.
Yeah.
And part of, I think, what we have to do is how do we, I think this notion of code switching sometimes can be real helpful, because like part is like what we're asking them to do is to constantly go back home. And I mean, so, and that's just a question of like how, and I think it's, at least on our faculty, we're starting this conversation about serving our first gen students better, and I think one of the things we haven't been thinking about as much is the kind of tools our students need, not just to succeed in college, but to continue and thrive in the relationships of the community that they depend on, you know, the whole time, and how to help them not feel totally so alienated from the people who love them and that they love, but at the same time also honor their own journey too. Sorry, I know it's kind of.
That's true. That's well said. Yeah.
So,
So what advice, like what is helpful for professors to say, for people who are navigating those different worlds, like, and I'm not first gen myself, so I think the empathy of sharing your own experience, I watched Eddie in action, that I can see that really works, but so if it's not to share your own similar experience, and only sometimes can it be like sharing those videos in the room, sharing somebody else's experience. What is helpful for professors to say to first gen and lower income students that helps them successfully navigate?
I think one of the most important things is just explaining to people the way that relationships work when you're thinking about graduate school and you're trying to access resources. That for me is the number one thing that people just have no awareness of. You know, this idea that, you know, there are people that you can go to, and that, you know, the fact that you don't have a particularly impressive GPA, you know, is not something that means that you cannot go to graduate school. You know, if you do something that's kind of significant, you have a significant relationship. You know, the importance of networking. That's so important for me, because when I went to school, I was, you know, I never thought that I would benefit. All I wanted to do was burn the school down. And when I left, I was like, I am never coming back to this document. You know, the only thing I wanted to do was drop a bomb on it. It was so completely, I hated every aspect of every second of that place's existence. And when I went away, you know, I was working, you know, in Hawaii, and because of this network, because I had a friend who was in Japan, said, dude, why don't you stop washing dishes and being a day laborer, you know, and maxed out a credit card. I went to Japan, and my life completely transformed, right? And at every step along the way, as I went, you know, to different grad programs and so on, there was some sort of a weird connection, right? A mentor who saw something in me, you know, who helped me, who wrote a letter or something like that, or a classmate who said, dude, that company's not working out, why don't you check out this one, right? And that, I think, is what's very hard for people to understand. They have this very sort of set idea of, you know, there's GPA, you know, there's bills and stuff like that. They often don't see the importance that networking and connections make. And, you know, when my letter, like, if I write them a kick-ass letter, they don't understand that, you know, when someone's looking at that, that's more significant than whether they have a 3.4 or a 3.8 or something like that. Yeah.
I'm curious to hear from the students on this.
Yeah, so I just think it's important to have like your support at home and your friends and your support on campus, whoever that may be. But I also think we talked about this at the Class Action Summit, that you can explain it to your parents and that it's not like a completely lost cause. You know, some parents don't care. Like, I know my dad does not care about school. He doesn't care about what I'm doing. He's not interested in that whatsoever. But I can still tell him and help him learn that, like, this is important in my life and this is relevant to me. So, you know, it doesn't, you know, you might not always be on the same page, but you can still teach your parents that there are other ways, and that you have to live your own life, and you have to network on your own at some point, and you have to have your own job and live your own life. And so, I feel like it's a conversation to definitely have, whether they discredit it or they don't. It's definitely one to stir up.
Yeah, I don't think I really thought much about networking during college, but I knew that I had people in the administration or faculty members that I could go to, but it was just one or two. And then I think my senior year was when it really hit me that, it's just necessary. And you need to talk to people, because I'm not really a really social person. But when you get those letters of recommendation, or somebody's mom or uncle or whatever is doing an internship, a paid internship, or a job, I think it's necessary. And I don't think it's something that was ever discussed in my high school or in class or anywhere, not even in orientation, how important it is to really talk to your faculty. I wasn't raised that way. I looked at figures of authority like a professor or a doctor or a policeman. You just don't question them. You don't really, you're not familiar with them. You just obey and do your thing. Yeah, it wasn't really something that I felt comfortable doing or that I knew was something that I had to be doing. So yeah.
I have I think a story related to this and maybe a question. It was important to me in college and then especially in grad school and then as a professor to try to explain to my parents what the heck I was doing. My dad wondered fourth and fifth and then sixth year of my PhD program when I was going to get a real job and all that. So whenever they'd come visit, I'd make sure they came while I was teaching and could come to a class that I was teaching. Infamously, I invited my dad. He was driving by campus to run some errand, and I invited him to come to campus. We got lunch on campus when I was an undergrad, and took him to my population ecology class that afternoon. And I had not expected this, but the topic was all about sexual reproduction. And so that was an awesome class period. he was raising his hand and asking questions. But I think I've always been trying to both explain to them, feeling like they needed to see real examples of what I was doing, to understand what was going on campus, but also to kind of claim that space that we belong, even if. And a thing that I think about a lot of the time, my parents would feel awkward coming to an awards dinner or something because they were never sure they were dressed appropriately, or they felt like they would say something dumb in front of a smart professor or something. Just about a month or so, maybe 2 months ago now, I won an honors teaching award, which is great, and I got invited to talk at the honors dinner, and I invited my parents to come to hear me talk. I should have practiced the speech, just as a reminder that speaking in front of the whole honors program is different than talking in the classroom. But anyway, I invited my parents so they could see it, and they were, as usual, a little nervous about did I wear the right thing? We don't want to embarrass ourselves. This is common themes from them. And then afterwards, my dad was sitting on the back of a seat in the lobby, and the president of the university walked out and made a point to shake my dad's hand and talk with him a bit. Our president talks about his first gen background and coming from a family with his father was an electrician, I think. And then afterwards, my dad was like, "Oh, whoever that guy was that was talking to me, he was real friendly." Yeah, that was the president of the university. Oh, well. I thought I didn't know because I might have said something goofy. But I wonder, I don't know, I don't imagine that your mom has maybe had the chance to come to campus and see what you did there, right? And I wonder, Lindsay, if your parents maybe would have ever had a chance, or if your off-campus friends, family would understand or be able to make sense of your experiences on campus. If that question makes sense. Yeah.
So it kind of makes sense. I feel like sometimes my friends' parents are more supportive. They understand what's going on in my life because I'm on campus. They make me meals. They invite me over for dinner. It's awesome. They're my second families. But yeah, my my own parents, I don't think they never came to orientation, like they've never been on campus, and they don't really care to, and that's totally fine with me. But they know that I'm there, and they know that I dedicate a majority of my time to that, and they're not mad, but yeah, they just don't really understand that it's a whole other world, and it's a whole other, world, I guess.
Yeah. So not a lot of curiosity about it though either. I'm hearing.
Yeah, no, none. But that, like I said, it's like that's where I spend the majority of my time. I feel like middle class parents are involved with their children and what they're doing, and I feel like working class, it's just kind of like they're like, well, we don't understand it, we don't really care, so that's kind of where I'm at. But I love my my friends' parents that are there that do support me. It's totally awesome. But yeah.
So one of the things that we do at Monmouth is a parent orientation. And over the last 3 summers actually, I've been able to hold during the breakout sessions that we have, to hold a session for first generation students, the parents of first generation college students. And I've just heard reflected in some of the student comments, it's superb opportunity for us to reach parents and have conversations about, because I just remembered the one slide that I spent some more time on, kind of hovered over, and this was just this past week, earlier Monday and Tuesday, about talking to faculty and advisors and building relationships with faculty and advisors. And so trying to help parents have the conversation with their students about coming to campus prepared to work on that and to sort of engage in that way. So it's nice to hear. I mean, part of what I think is really encouraging is that faculty are being primed and sort of prepared to work with first-gen students in classrooms and can kind of continue that. But we also include parents in the conversation too, so that we're like sort of reaching students, parents, and then the faculty who are teaching them as well.
But you must have a hard time getting, people at work.
Yeah.
Well,
there's a large turnout. The parents come to orientation, but the most I've had are like sort of 12 people at the breakout session. So I do think a lot of parents probably read the description of the breakout session and say, either if they don't understand what it's about, or there's still a bit of stigma attached to it. But then we do miss, and we talked about this in the debriefs, parents who can't make it to the orientation for a variety of reasons, having a website for them too, and some handouts and other kinds of materials so they can travel back to parents who can't make it there physically for the talk. Yeah. So no, and I think the question I had actually for the panel, for everyone, is because I'm in the beginning phases of this work on my campus with all of our colleagues and collaborators, to what extent do you, on your campuses, in this atmosphere of like high competition for students in terms of admissions and recruitment and trying to get students to campus, to what extent do you hear conversations to the public, sort of external conversations about first-gen students and the resources and support on your campuses for them? Because in a lot of ways, what I think I hear in our region is that the competition's so intense that people don't want to talk about anything that might detract from attracting the best and the brightest, for whatever that means. And because we don't have a lot of, the programs in place. Like I do often talk to students about the University of Michigan's program because they have some really great web resources and videos and stuff like that. We don't really have that much. What's the conversation, the discourse on your campus about this in terms of outward facing or public conversations about what happens on your campus for students who are first gen? And this is for students and staff and faculty in your institution. Do people talk about it? I mean, is it a conversation that has currency and sort of acceptability on the campus and outside of the campus?
Well, this is something that came up at that panel this morning.
Yes, right.
There's this kind of fundamental contradiction, right? Because the university has a sort of interest in attracting basically rich students,
right?
And there's this kind of idea that if we could just get more of those people to come here, then we get more contributions and everything else, right? And so a lot of the advertising and stuff like that maybe is canted in that direction. So in some ways, I feel we do have a president, we have an administration, we have a lot of people that, seem, when you talk to them one-on-one are quite supportive, but translating that into the actual policies of the university and the way the university presents itself is much more problematic. And I feel as if our university, there are certain the ways in which it represents itself, there are ways that, kind of appeal to, traditional quote unquote elite ideas of colleges. And that's, I think, a problem. Yeah.
I also kind of feel like faculty can identify with first gen and they know what first gen are, but I feel like as a student on campus, it's not talked about, it's not like a discussion. Like you guys are saying, like when you were in college, it's not like you're talking about your socioeconomic status. You know what I mean? Like no one talks about that. And it's still true, you know what I mean? So although there's all this discussion happening with faculty and maybe administration and all that, all the higher ups, the students themselves might not even know what they're first gen, they might not even know what first gen is. So I feel like just making it aware, making it present on campus, making it a thing even, I feel like that might have some sort of influence in where your college can go in supporting first gen students.
Yeah, thanks. Well, and just a comment, oftentimes administrators will listen to students about issues like that more than they'll listen to faculty.
Right.
Yeah.
So push it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Do you want to say anything about Bennington?
I think for Bennington, it's what I've heard is, and maybe Fran can talk more about this. She works for admissions. With Flow, we worked on building a website that has information about being Flow on campus for current and prospective students. So I think creating more visibility online, like something that students can just Google or access when they're considering Bennington. I think that was a huge step because we didn't have that before Flow started.
Yeah, and sorry.
No, go
Our visiting students weekend this year too, we had these buttons. And so all our Flow faculty, staff, and students would wear the buttons and talk about Flow, and we had students visiting. So I think we're starting to kind of raise this as an identity, and I feel like so far we've had support at the administration level, and they have been sort of publicizing it and touting it as a reason to come to Bennington. Fran can maybe speak more to this, but I remember being in my office a couple months ago and a tour guide coming through, and one of the parents actually asked, "Oh, what supports do you have for first generation students on campus?" And the tour guide said, "Oh, well, we have this wonderful program called Flow." And so I called it, and I was like, oh my God. It's just like, how much do people really know about us on campus, things, but we definitely, we worked a lot on awareness this year, and I guess it worked. Fran, did you want to say anything more from an admissions perspective?
It's actually kind of funny. I was just hired full time into admissions, and I remember going for my interview and I was petrified of rocking the boat. I was going back and forth with Jocelyn. How much can I say that we're doing wrong without it being too much for me to be kind of ruled out? And it was actually at the first gen summit. There was this kind of what's it called, the Fox Index, the Gunning Fox Index, It told you what education level you needed to be able to understand kind of a commentary on a college program, a college activity, anything that was on your website. So I plugged in everything that Bennington had, that we in admissions kind of hand out, that we talk about, the words that we use. You needed to be a college senior to take it in. So forget first gen, forget low income, forget working class. You need a senior level education regardless. And you might have some of that kind of capital to begin with, but you needed that. And we took that forth to communications, to our diversity and inclusion program. I finally decided to talk about it in my interviews, and it must have worked because we have it now, and we're using it, and we're looking more at our materials, and that's something that's on the front of the admissions office agenda, I think, as it is in a lot of places now, is understanding the ways in which you don't just tout diversity or flow identities as a recruitment tactic to get middle class students in the classroom to say it's going to further them and help their education, but how it actually is built to be the support structure that we intend it to be, and talked about that way. So I hope it works.
I have a question for the faculty. convinced that all of their issues are incredibly different than what undergrad questions would have, but then the things that they bring up sound very similar to me about having a family, how to talk to a professor, which the professor relationship is different when you're a grad student than an undergrad, but fundamentally to me it seems the same. And to me I keep hearing the same issues, so I'm curious, what should I be attuned to what's a specific graduate student thing that came up for you that didn't come up in undergrad?
I think the biggest thing for me was, and I think this gets back to one of Sean's points earlier, understanding why I was there. Because it took me a very long time. It took like an embarrassingly long time to figure this out. Because I thought grad school was just like undergrad. And I thought I keep my head down, I make good grades, and then I'll do great. I did not understand literally until like my 6th or maybe 7th year that that's not what it was about. That didn't matter at all. Like that was incredibly eye-opening for me. And I look back and I'm like, how could I not have realized that? But I think nobody ever told me. And I just sort of didn't understand that graduate school is a completely different animal and how much it really mattered to build relationships. So much so that like when my first year of grad school, a professor asked me to start writing a paper with him, that's like the pinnacle, right? That's the best thing you can do in grad school. And I hemmed and hawed and I was like, well, could you give me course credit for it? I wasn't going to do it unless he gave me course credit. And I wish that he would have said to me, no, and here's why. But he thought that was weird, and he's like, okay, you can have course credit. But then I sort of never followed up with him on it. We started working together that term, but once the course credit was down, like, well, new semester, and I didn't really understand at all. And then he did try and stop me from he wanted me to keep working with him and not go work at this Ed Policy Center as an RA. And I couldn't understand why he wanted that either. So it seems like I really think like just basic stuff like that, like explaining the importance of relationships, the importance of publishing, it might seem really stupid and really simple and of course, that honestly nobody ever told me, and it wasn't until I was finishing and I looked at my peers and they had CVs with publications and I was like, oh, whoops. I guess that's what I should have been doing. I totally didn't get it. So I think it being extremely literal, like the article that I wrote, the unwritten rules of grad school, like if somebody had told me these are the unwritten rules, I really would have benefited from that.
So it's the importance of finding a mentor.
Yeah, that too, and I had no idea. Yeah. I didn't understand that either.
Yeah.
I had like 4 or 5 different advisors during my time. I never really developed a solid relationship with people. I didn't even understand why that was important until the end. So it was like looking back, of course. But in the moment, I thought if I'm just a good student and I work hard and I do well on my, in my TAing or whatever, that I'll be fine and I'll be able to find a job and it'll all be great. And obviously, I missed some of the important things there. I really wish that somebody had sat me down and just straight up told me that.
Do you think you would have believed him at the time though, or do you think he was on his side using me to get his paper out?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think pointing to other graduate students, like saying, look at so-and-so, they're on the market, they've been publishing, and also just the importance of publishing in sociology journals and in top journals. I didn't understand that until way too late. Like, I really didn't understand any of this. And I would say along with that, my first term in grad school, one of my professors is for our research methods class, basically sat us down and was like, none of you are going to have any original ideas, and you're not going to be able to do any good work. And they kind of, I think, was trying to like break us down. But I really internalized that, and I still feel like, I was already feeling that way, and to have a professor tell me my first term in graduate school that I wasn't going to be capable of doing anything and wasn't going to have anything good to publish or say or anything, that stuck with me. I still hear his voice in my head. So I think no, it really did. It really I really was like, wow, I'm a piece of shit. And I'm like, and he knows about like building confidence is I know certain faculty pride themselves on being able to break students down. That doesn't really work so well with first gen students.
No.
We do that ourselves.
Already.
You know? Right? I mean, it's like what Jocelyn said earlier. It's like, you know, I think faculty need to like really focus on being like, no, you can do this, and these are, but to the point where I have other faculty who kind of look at me and I think are like, well, she's a softie, you know. But it's like, no, I have high expectations, but I think they don't understand the importance of relaying to people that you are capable when people believe again and again that they're not.
Yeah.
You know, so I would say that that's an added thing too. That no, I never really felt like any time in graduate school that anybody really believed in me or thought that I could, you know, that I was capable of something, and that would have made a lot of difference for me too.
Yeah. We're about out of time, and I think the idea of relaying that we're all capable is a good positive message at the end of this, because we are all relaying, like through our own work and also through our communications with our students at our various institutions and with peers at our various institutions, that these first gen working class folks, all of us, are very capable. The students are capable, and we're here to support that. A good summary. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you all.
Thank you. 1 minute. Excuse me, 1 minute. I just want to say that we have developed the Working Class Studies Association Class Culture Caucus. And by culture, I mean, you know, where we came from, working class cultures, middle class cultures, and values. You know, as somebody who's been around for a while, I miss a lot about my original culture. And so anyways, I just wanted to say that we're having a meeting today from 5 to 6:45 at the bench, and I have some flyers, and Betsy has flyers, and if anybody wants to come and talk about that stuff, please join us.
And we'll take a moment for self-promotion. We're presenting our joint research project tomorrow at 8:30 in this very same room, and we'd love to see you all there. Jocelyn's going to present on her